I'm Linda van Tilburg for Biz News, and I have Charles Cilliers, the co-founder of the Patriotic Alliance, with me to discuss Herman Mashaba's book that has such a fallout. Hi, Charles, and welcome.
Thank you, Linda. Yeah, I think I'm not here as in my capacity really with the PA, even though I guess we have a lot of association with ActionSA and Herman. But I guess I'm here more because I've written a few books myself and I understand the industry quite well.
Yeah, that's why we thought you could give us a perspective. But can we just sort of, first of all, talk a little bit about politics, about the reaction to this? Do you understand why people, in the ANC said gross deception, why opposition parties have been actually quite quiet about it? Can you understand the uproar about this?
Yeah, I think that it's an issue with any matter, whether it's a book or a car that you're buying or selling. You want to know the truth, and if it emerges that something was said or done that wasn't fully in line with what you think you're getting. If you're seeing a book that's promising to be the unauthorized biography of anybody, you have a certain expectation of that, and you're going to be angry. That's a perfectly normal reaction.
So do you think there was deception, the fact that Prince Mashele and Herman Mashaba didn't reveal that Herman was actually paying for the book?
I think that it's a serious question that has to be asked. I personally do respect many people in ActionSA, Michael Bowman in particular, but I don't want to be them in this scenario because it's an unenviable situation to be in, where I read another book about Herman Mashaba, The Accidental Mayor, when that came out I think it came out in 2020. And, I read that book in a day or two. Michael Bowman wrote that. I think it's the first, maybe only book he's ever written. And I thought it was quite a good book. And there's a line in that book that I'll never forget, which isn't his coinage, but, he was expressing the political truism that if you're explaining in politics, you're losing. And unfortunately, there's a heck of a lot of explaining that has to happen here. And you just don't want to be in that position, especially not in politics. You do not want to have to be explaining yourself. And unfortunately, these explanations don't sound amazing. They don't sound very good from where I'm sitting.
The explaining is not coming from Mashaba's camp. They've actually basically distanced themselves from it. The explaining seems to be coming from the author.
Yeah, and that interview that he gave on television that I saw this morning was a bit of a train wreck. Honestly, you have to ask yourself why you would even go on and do interviews if that's how you're going to perform. It's going to be difficult for him to recover from this, honestly, because he had such an amazing reputation, such a good name as an analyst, and this has done him some harm. I don't wish him any harm personally, but the fact is that he suffered some probably almost irrecoverable harm here. No one is ever going to pay him 12.5 million rand to write a book ever again. I don't think that anyone ever was going to anyway, but this will be a hard thing to come back from.
Can we talk about that number that you've mentioned, 12.5 million? A lot of journalists and writers put up their hands and said, please sign me up. That is an enormous amount. Is that a really big amount for somebody to write your biography?
It's an unfathomable amount of money. If you look at political biographies that have done well in this country, Long Walk to Freedom has globally sold 15 million copies, right? So if you're going to go and sell 15 million copies of a book, then that makes 12.5 million seem quite reasonable, right? But if you sit down and work out that royalties can go from between anything from 5 to, I guess, if you've got an incredible deal, like 14% from a publisher, right? Because publishers do not pay enormous royalties on books. And if you're going to go and do it in an entrepreneurial way and self-publish, then you have to take the money out up front. You pay for your printing, then you have to put together, you have to find a distributor and pay that person, or get somebody to do it for you, but there's quite a lot of admin involved in that. Then you can make a bit more money with the book, especially if you're someone like Mashaba who goes to a lot of events and, can maybe go back to his old founding days of selling Black Like Me products out of the boot of his car, right? And if he's going to sell books again like that everywhere he goes, then you can make a bit more money. But if you go with the traditional publishing model, which they would have had with Jonathan Ball, they're one of the most established local companies for publishing, and you say, let's say 15%, I mean, you still have to sell like upwards of 500,000 copies to just break even, to get your 12.5 million back. So the question that I had to ask myself is was Herman Mashaba just being incredibly optimistic about how many books he's likely to sell, which makes you wonder if he's an egomaniac, because it's highly unlikely you're going to sell 500,000 copies. Jake White's book about winning the World Cup was one of the most successful books in the country, and I mean, at one point it crossed 100,000. I mean, 50 Shades of Grey was an enormous runaway success in this country, and I don't even think that, even if you're starting to get to those kinds of numbers, that you're going to make 12.5 million from a 15% royalty share. So from a business point of view, it just simply doesn't make sense, right? So this is a man who's been sold to us as this enormously successful businessman who knows what he's doing, cuts a good deal. If Gayton McKenzie, the president of the PA, had done this, I would have strangled him, as big and scary as he is. And I would have just said, you're supposed to be better at business than this, right? You can get the best writer in this country to do a book like that for you for, I don't know, I suppose 2 million, and then you're going top tier, right? And then I suppose you're doing that with the understanding that you're not going to make money, right? That it's a vanity project, and you're throwing this money at it, and it's fine. You want votes, you want people to read about how wonderful you are, and the question that I think the criticism that people have is that when they've got this side deal here with a non-disclosure agreement and all of that, you're effectively funding a hagiography, you're funding a praise piece. And whether it is or isn't, because they're trying to sell it now to say, no, he was still independent, Prince Mashele was still independent doing this. I'm not going to give you 12.5 million rand and then still allow you to insult me at the end of that, right? I mean, that just doesn't make sense. So even if you just want a praise piece, you can get that for a lot less. So it raises questions around the integrity of the people involved, the project itself, and the astuteness of him as a businessman. I mean, I could go on, but you get the idea. There's nothing but bad here. I look at this and I can find nothing good, unfortunately.
Well, what's interesting, you mentioned the fees that would likely be paid. I mean, a good writer in South Africa, you said, about 2 million rand. He, in an interview with 702, Prince Mashele, said, try to compare a book that was written by Walter Isaacson about Steve Jobs. I mean, that is like the big league. Could you seriously compare a book about a South African politician with a book about Steve Jobs?
No, you can't, simply because the publishing market in South Africa is pitifully small, right? So if Herman Mashaba believes that people are going to be reading his book in the London Underground and the New York subway, and that he's going to sell 30, 40, 50, 100 million copies of his book, as you would do with a personage like Steve Jobs, then you have to start asking questions around, is he on planet Earth? Is he living in the same world that we are? Because in South Africa, to be counted as a bestseller, you need to sell 2,000 copies, right? I mean, when you cross the 5,000 mark, they don't pop Moet and Chandon champagne. They'll pop the JC Leroux just to stay within budget, right? You do not make money with books in this country, right? You have to do something extraordinary, like Jake White did, and he hit the market at just the right time with in black and white back in those days, right? There's some, and it was just in time for the Christmas lists, that kind of thing. Big corporates were buying the book. You could say that best case scenario, maybe this book with the funders that Herman has, big business, big corporates, that kind of thing, maybe bulk buys. Yeah, maybe you can sell 100,000, 150,000 copies, but you're never going to be able to justify that kind of money, right? So it's this is ludicrous. This is one of the most ludicrous things that I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah. So we've asked you to put on your author's hat because you are a published author. Can we ask you just a little bit to put back on your political hat? Why have the opposition parties actually been quite reluctant to condemn it? Normally, you guys would be guns blazing. I've actually found it. We asked Musi Maimami, he said he didn't want to comment, and all the other opposition parties were quite quiet about this. Are they sort of, what's happening here?
Yeah, well, fortunately, I'm not here in my capacity for the PA. But even if I was, I think that facts are facts, right? And I can't for the life of me tell you why we wouldn't speak openly about anything in this country. As a politician, if you only say what's on your mind when it is convenient or comfortable to do that, how is anyone going to believe you when things get difficult, right? How are you going to speak truth? And I mean, this is the issue that people have with traditional politicians in this country, right? They are trying to say the right thing to the right audience at the right time, and instead of just sticking to what you really think. And, I think that's why in the PA we tend to not have to think too hard about spinning everything, because we just say what we always think. I mean, that's a cultural trait for us in the PA, is even if you're wrong, right? You don't know you're wrong, just, I mean, it sounds like a fridge magnet or whatever, but speak your truth, right? At all times. And the next time that I see anyone from ActionSA, Herman Mashaba, it'll be fine, right? Because they know that anyone in the PA will just say what's on their mind at any time. It's not personal. And if everyone else isn't doing that, then they are probably hurting their own authenticity and their own credibility.
What does this mean for the trust that that voters have in political parties in South Africa? Are they going to trust ActionSA and Herman Mashaba that they are speaking the truth?
Yeah, Linda, I can't speak for what people are looking for in a leader on that side there, but I think that where ActionSA was really searching for that middle class voter that would look quite seriously at something like the DA, and Action was trying to present itself as an alternative in that space, that I think that, and that's probably the kind of person that would buy the book anyway, that person is now going to sit there and say, I'm not sure if I can fully trust this person. Now, we know that nobody trusts a politician because politicians will disappoint you. They'll lie at some point. But this is so much orchestration that goes into this, right? And I understand that at ActionSA is saying that Herman Mashaba didn't see the cover, and that the unauthorized part wasn't approved by him. But even if you grant them that and say, okay, we'll have a pass on that, there's still too many questions here that a critical person is going to feel uncomfortable with. So I can't see that this wouldn't hurt Action, especially if they're trying to position themselves an alternative to the DA, which is also full of its own deceptions and little stratagems and so on, but has never had to navigate something as personally embarrassing to the leader of the party as this.
And the trust that donors might have, political donors for the party.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the key issues, is that a lot of the people who give money to the DA are also giving money to ActionSA. And I mean, I don't know. I mean, I haven't gone and looked at the party disclosures and some of this is probably hearsay on my part, but you can understand why there might be this excitement around the rise of ActionSA, especially since they might be able to pull in the middle-class black voter in a way that some of the other parties haven't been able to do. And I unfortunately, and I mean, this is the simple truth of the matter, is I think that the ANC are celebrating this moment, right? Because this was the politician who was setting himself up most strongly and clearly as the anti-ANC guy, right? And if you're going to stand there and talk about how much better you are than the morally bankrupt ANC, then you're going to have to keep your house absolutely spotless if you're going to stand there in judgment of anyone else. Now, it's very easy to judge the ANC, but then keep your house clean. And I think that's what's going to be very difficult. And wherever he goes from now on, if I were the ANC, I would make very sure that this isn't forgotten. Unfortunately. I mean, I'm not saying I'm not celebrating this. This is actually very sad and quite depressing because we like Herman Mashaba. We've found him to be somebody that's been a reliable coalition partner. And when we had the fallout in the coalitions, ActionSA nobly stood there and stubbornly stood by the facts and the truth. And they took a lot of blows for that because people were saying, oh, you guys are just taking the side of the PA. And they were saying, no, we're taking the side of truth. So that's the way we've always seen them. So this is, for me personally, and I think maybe for the party as well, it's very sad that we have to deal with this because we understand them and we have come to know them as a party that's been very forthright and honest.
The other person that's involved in this is the other author who said he wasn't paid for this, which is
Brutus.
Which is Brutus, yes.
Well, I'm not sure if he was an author or a researcher. I'm a little confused as to exactly what he did here, but he's the reason that we even know about this.
And he's married to Mpho Phalatse, which is the former mayor of Johannesburg. Could we read anything into that?
Well, I mean, I'm amazed at what's happening here because Brutus was a well-regarded member of ActionSA, and then he married a well-regarded member of the DA, and those two parties famously don't get along very well, right? So I saw that and went, wow, this is going to be very interesting. And at the time that it happened, there was the speculation that maybe Mpho Phalatse was joining ActionSA, and that there's perhaps more to this marriage than meets the eye. But by contrast, it seems that Brutus is no longer going to be welcome to darken the door of ActionSA.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting development as well. Well, Charles Cilliers, co-founder of the Patriotic Alliance, but he's actually here to speak as an author, and so we understand you had that hat on today. Thank you so much for speaking to us.
Thanks, Linda. Great meeting you. Actually, my first interview with you.